Hello everyone, and thank you for joining PCM for the Microsoft webinar, Windows 8 Modern Tools for Business. My name is Claude Trono, and I'll be your host and moderator for today. I just wanted to cover a few quick housekeeping issues. First off, we will be recording this presentation, and we will be sending out an on-demand version to everyone. So if you have to drop off the call for any reason, you will be able to listen to the rest of the presentation. At the end of today's presentation, we will be conducting a live question and answer session. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please use the Q&A or chat pane that can be found on the right-hand side of your screen. You can send the questions straight to me, and they'll be addressed during the Q&A session. All right, now I would like to introduce our presenter, Britt. He's our expert from Microsoft who's been with the company for 14 years and has delivered presentations and trainings all over the United States as well as outside of the US. Now, without any further delay, I would like to turn today's presentation over to Britt. Britt?
Well, thank you very much. And hello, everyone. I appreciate getting the invite to come speak to you on Windows 8. This is an interesting topic for a variety of reasons. I know anytime that we release a new operating system, it sometimes takes a little bit to understand where we're coming from, what we're trying to do, and the changes we've made. And Windows 8 is no exception. It's a very dynamic, very different operating system than we've done before. And so I appreciate you taking the time to see what we have to offer and maybe get some background on why we're doing some of the things that we're doing. Now, when you look at Windows 8, and since we are talking about business, I am talking about professional, the SKUs have changed a little bit in title. We used to have Home Premium, we used to have Professional, and we had Ultimate and a few others, and things have greatly simplified. Now you have Windows 8 and Windows 8 Pro. Windows 8, I guess, would be the equivalent of like a Home or a Home Premium version, whereas Windows 8 Pro is pretty much the equivalent of Windows 7 Professional as far as feature sets and what you can do with it. But the idea here is we wanted to take an operating system that we had and build it and devise it for whatever device you may be looking to use. Now, we did this with the express purpose of offering a choice. And by that, I mean a different way of doing things than you see in other products. Let me explain. Let's take Android, for instance. Android is a great operating system that started out as a phone operating system, and it grew to a tablet. Let's take iOS. iOS started as a phone OS and grew to a tablet. And I'm not nothing negative to say about iOS or the success of the iPad. I mean, clearly it's a phenomenal device. But when you look at the iPad versus, sitting next to an iMac, it's a very different computing experience. The paradigm's different. The way you access applications, the things you do with them, function very differently than they do on, say, an iMac. What we wanted to do with Windows 8 is provide the same experience across all devices. So whether you had a laptop, a desktop, a tablet, whatever device, it was going to be a similar experience. And that was kind of the reimagining that we were devising when we were building Windows 8 as a platform. And we wanted to create something that was very finger-friendly, very dynamic when it came to touch, but also something that was very productive. And that's, I think, probably one of the biggest keys is while there are great devices based upon iOS and Android, they're mainly consumption devices. I don't know too many people who feel that they are equally as productive on one of those devices as they are on, say, a laptop. So that's kind of the direction that we were going with that. All right, so when we look at this and we look at how we've continued to reimagine Windows, when we look at the fact that we built this on this solid foundation, this evolution of the operating system, previously 7, which was a very successful operating system. We took some of the things, some of the features and some of the capabilities, and we expanded upon those. And at the same time creating a more dynamic operating system that actually functioned on lighter hardware, offered a more robust experience with less requirements, and we really hit the nail on the head with that. Now, while we do have a new thing, like a new start screen, we also still have a familiar desktop. We have apps, app compatibility with all of your previous apps. We also have a Windows Store where you can purchase new applications. So we've kind of expanded upon what you already have and given you, in addition to that, some new capabilities. The other thing that Windows 8 has done, which I think is really pretty compelling, is what it's done for hardware manufacturers. When you look at all of the different devices that have come out in the last year and are continuing to come out, it's amazing. It really is amazing what hardware manufacturers have done in creating new and compelling different devices, be it all-in-ones. I'm seeing a lot of really incredible all-in-ones that come out with incredibly rich features and very large screens that offer full touch capability. Just really, really huge leaps forward in design. As well as along with all-in-ones, we also see laptops, which are now coming with touch screens. We see some interesting devices. Lenovo has something called the Yoga, which is a standard laptop that actually flips all the way around. So the keyboard rests on the bottom, the screen on top, and it functions as a tablet. Asus has a Tai Chi, which has a 1080p screen on the laptop side. You close it, there's another 1080p screen that's a touch tablet. So when you close the lid, it functions as a tablet. Dell has a design where the screen actually flips around inside a bracket and closes, so you can have a tablet experience. And they're doing all of these things because we understand that people want flexibility in their design. Sometimes they want a tablet, sometimes they want a laptop. Depending upon the situation and scenario, building these devices to fit many occasions is kind of the idea, because we all have this kind of idea in our head of what the perfect device is. Maybe for some people it's a 10-inch device, for some it's a 12, maybe for some it's a 7 or even a 5. And it's kind of interesting as we've seen things evolve and kind of change. We see tablets and devices getting gradually smaller. At the same time, we see cell phones getting gradually bigger. I mean, one of the more popular phones on the market right now, I think, has over a 5-inch screen. So at what point does it stop being a phone, and at what point does it start being a tablet? So understanding this world that we live in now as far as device development goes, and trying to figure out where we can find the sweet spots for devices is something that's pretty key. But along with finding that proper hardware mix, we also have to look at things that really kind of factor into it from a software perspective, okay? So creating an experience that's really pretty dynamic, whether you're using a mouse or a finger or a keyboard, that's obviously something that we have to figure into it. At the same time, we have to always think about thinner, lighter, faster. Now, I said that 8 is a more lightweight and faster operating system, and one of the reasons it has to be is because we understand that it's going to be running on lighter weight hardware. For instance, the latest Intel Atom processors versus a full, say, i5 or i7. Those kinds of things factor into it. A longer battery life. Well, one of the benefits of using a smaller, less robust processor is you get a longer battery life. So being able to fit that into a thinner, lighter device is something that's pretty important. At the same time, we have to look at other things that factor into it, like advanced security, both physically and software-wise. Sensors and extensibility, do you add to these devices, near-field communications or accelerometers or all of these other capabilities that you have, and at the same time make these devices at a high quality level so that, if for some reason they need some level of ruggedability or they're meeting some kind of healthcare requirements or what have you, you have the flexibility in these designs working in tandem with the software to give you a device that meets your needs. And on top of that, as I said, then you have choice. So do you choose a tablet? Do you choose a convertible? Do you choose a hybrid? And by the way, if you hear the term hybrid, essentially what that means is rather than a laptop that somehow converts to a tablet, it's a laptop where you basically rip the screen off and the screen functions as a tablet itself. So that's what we're looking at there. And along with that, you have notebooks, desktops, and all-in-ones. All right, so let's talk about getting it all done. And this goes back to one device that's serving multiple needs. And as I said, there are other tablets out there that are wonderful consumption devices, but then you're left with the problem of, okay, I have a great device that's lightweight that I can consume, I can read or I can watch videos or I can surf the web or what have you, but when it's time to get work done, what am I doing with that? Is that really something that's really functional for it? And that's why when we were looking at developing Windows 8, we had to create a platform that would do both. So you have a situation where you have tablet mobility, and that's, either that's on Wi-Fi or that's on 3G, 4G, LTE, etc. Having that capability to carry that device with you and have connectivity everywhere is important. Having also the power of a PC, so not only do you get that lightweight form factor where you get to carry it around, you also have full Windows capability. And that's important on two fronts. Number one, all of your applications will just work. You don't have to find a specific compatible version for the tablet that you're using. Your applications that you use on your desktop will work. You have that compatibility, etc. You also have built-in apps. You have a new application framework, which is what you've seen so frequently in the advertisements is the start screen. And the start screen really is not something that should be looked at as hugely foreign or different. All essentially the start screen is we took the start button and we blew it up to a full-size screen, mainly because while a start button is very, very efficient for a keyboard and mouse, start button is not that great of an experience for a finger because the menuing is very tight, very compact, and you don't have the precision with the finger that you do with a mouse, so we expanded it to that start screen. Well, included in that start screen is these new modern applications. What I mean by modern is they're lightweight, they consume almost no hard disk space, and they use very little system resources when they run. Yet you can get a lot of good information. We also have a technology with it called Live Tiles, where these applications can actually update you with news and information throughout the day by sipping information from the internet. So that kind of flexibility is added in there as well. So with that type of kind of tandem thing where you have these new applications that are really designed for tablets or for the full screen experience, coupled with the applications that you already have, you have a flexible platform to essentially carry one device wherever you're going or have that one experience. And if you are carrying that one device, if you happen to have a desktop or an all-in-one back at the office or back home, you have that same experience. You can work it both ways, either with touch on a tablet or with mouse and keyboard, and it's an effective experience either way. On top of that, as I mentioned, there are a couple of things that come in to Windows 8 that are, in some cases you might think, well, yeah, that's obvious, but it's important to note that it's here, and it's here whether it's on a tablet or a full-size laptop or desktop, etc. Live Tiles I explained as far as being able to update you with information within the context of the start screen, within the context of that particular tile, without ever having launched the application. Start screen, I mentioned, is we took the start button and we blew it up to a full-size screen, which made it a lot easier to interact with a fingertip versus a mouse and keyboard. Now there's also a mail application that's built into Windows 8. Now, that application is not Outlook. It has a lot of features and functions, but it's part of the operating system as opposed to part of the Office. One thing that's important to note about that application is it is very much an email account aggregator, so it will hold however many accounts you have, and it also supports Exchange. So if you do have a corporate email that's running Exchange on the back end, that application will tie into it and you can get your business email on it. It's just not as feature-rich as Outlook is. Along with that, a VPN client, so you can have a protected connection with your corporate resources. Mobile broadband, as I mentioned, 3G, 4G, LTE, depending upon the device. Wi-Fi, of course, ABGN. Remote desktop, yes, you can remote desktop into an all-in-one or a desktop or laptop or what have you, whatever you need. And you do have offline files and folder synchronization. Along with that, we have a technology called SkyDrive that's been introduced as an application within Windows 8 that allows you to store gigabytes worth of files in the cloud that you can synchronize between this device and whatever desktop or laptop you may have back at the office or any other devices you might carry with you. So you do have a lot of flexibility there. It's your business, keep it your way or keep it that way, etc. And basically what I mean by that is security. Security is very, very important. And we've spent a lot of years really tightening up security in Windows over the last several iterations, and I think we've really done a particularly good job. And that starts actually with Trusted Boot in Windows 8. And Trusted Boot is something that's an outgrowth of new developments in hardware architecture in tandem with what Microsoft's doing. So for the past 30 some odd years, the kind of the starter brain for the computer that keeps the hardware focused and in check is actually not the processor, it's something called the BIOS. And like I said, the BIOS is really old in technology terms. And it is being replaced by something called UEFI, Universal Extensible Framework Infrastructure, I believe is what it is. UEFI is a new technology that's replacing that. It's giving you a nice graphical interface to work with your settings, and it offers some other nice tidbits like a much smaller vulnerability footprint for malware and rootkits and things that get in on your system. Now that UEFI works very well with Windows 8 in verifying at boot that there's no type of malware that's running in the system from startup. So all of that works really, really well together. So we do a great job of narrowing that vulnerability footprint dramatically. Along with that, we have a feature called BitLocker and BitLocker to Go. And these technologies were actually something that started in Windows 7, but they were only available on the higher end SKUs. BitLocker is now available on Windows 8 Pro, which is good for a couple of reasons. What BitLocker does is it essentially encrypts your entire hard drive. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important because let's say, for instance, you have a laptop and you have a lot of documents that are maybe of a non-disclosure business reason, or maybe for personal reasons or what have you. You want to encrypt that drive, so if your laptop grows legs in an airport somewhere, they get your device, but they don't get your data. It's not going to be able to be read, even if they pull out the hard drive and stick it in another machine. So you have that protection, that peace of mind. Along with that, there's a technology called BitLocker to Go, which enables you to encrypt external peripherals like thumb drives or external hard drives or anything of the sort, so that when you have data that you have to offload to a separate device, when you're carrying it from point A to point B, again, if that device gets lost, you don't have to worry about anyone getting your data, which is really, really key. The next thing on here, Internet Explorer 10. Internet Explorer 10 has also made a lot of strides with regard to security. One of the things we have is a technology called Smart Screen, which helps essentially prevent phishing attacks and other types of malware getting through the browser. So all the way around, a lot of good technology there. Along with that, we have what's called Windows Defender. Now, this is something that I'm pretty excited about personally. I think it's something I wish maybe it'd come a little sooner, but in fact, what we have within Windows 8 is antivirus and anti-malware included in the operating system. Okay, so from the time that you boot up your machine is protected by antivirus and anti-malware solution. You can actually find that in the control panel. It's called Windows Defender, and it's very effective. Not only is it a very lightweight antivirus program, it's got a really robust back end. It is actually tied to our Microsoft Enterprise Forefront security. So you get very, very high-grade, enterprise-grade security on a desktop, even if it's for your home PC. Now, the cool thing about that is not only do you get it, it's free for the life of the machine. There's no subscription model. You don't have to pay a yearly fee. It's not 6 months free and then you have to pay. It's flat out free for as long as you want it. Now, having said that, if you do have an antivirus solution that you prefer, you can absolutely turn ours off and yours will run just fine. The key thing to note, though, is if you are going to use an alternative solution, make sure that it's designed to run on Windows 8. So all the way around, a much more secure operating system when you take a look at Windows 8 as far as what's available there. Now, as far as working well with others, if you do happen to work in a corporate environment or you have clientele that works in a corporate environment, Windows 8 is absolutely designed, Windows 8 Professional is absolutely designed to work in that type of environment. And the other thing to note is that Windows 8 will coexist in an environment very happily with Windows 7 machines, Windows Vista machines, Windows XP machines. They will absolutely talk, they will communicate, they will work just fine, okay? So some of the capabilities to point out in Windows 8, you do have domain join capability, so it can be part of a network. It can be a device in an Active Directory for us, all of that fun stuff. Group policy is absolutely enforceable. In fact, when you couple Server 2012 with Windows 8, you get, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200 new group policies that you can add, so you can do fun things like turn off USB ports or lock down certain applications, etc. We also have another capability that's really nice, that if you go into the PC settings, actually under the General tab, you can see a little window on the left-hand side with the listing of that. If you go into the General section, you can actually, there's two different wizards that you can run. You can run a wizard that will clean up your Windows 8 installation and leave your files intact, or you can actually do a full reinstall of Windows 8 and bring it to a clean install just with the bits that are on the box itself. You don't need, for instance, recovery disks or maybe a recovery partition. You can bring it back to a clean install with just what's on the machine as it is. It's a very handy feature. We actually call that the hand-me-down feature. But it's really good, and I've actually used it myself, and I was quite pleased with how it came out. As I said, being able to deploy alongside Windows 7 or previous systems works very well. You do have the capability to purchase Windows 8 through volume licensing, and you can do so with software assurance as well, so you can basically insure yourself for future updates, which we will have. Now, after that, there's one thing I do want to point out, and I know this is no surprise. There are a lot of people who are still running Windows XP. There are. I know there are. There are a lot out there. Now, it's important to note, though, that when you're looking at an operating system, something that you're perhaps running your business on, that is something that's kind of core to the technology and to the success of the company, from data, data collecting, data creating, data storing, etc. But for those of you who are still on Windows XP and quite happy with it, I would like to point out that there are children in middle school who weren't born when Windows XP launched. This operating system has been out for a while. This is something that that has lasted far longer than I think we'd ever expected initially. So that being said, you got to take a look at what that ultimately means. What it means is that support is going away. Support ends April 8th, 2014. No more hot fixes, no more shims, no more updates, nothing. It's done. We're now looking 3 generations back on this, and the problem with it is there are many viruses and malware and security threats, etc., that were not even conceived of when Windows XP was developed. They just weren't there. We could not have forecasted. We had no idea that some of the things that we deal with on a regular basis today would even be thought of at that point in time. So that's something to consider. The other thing that you need to consider is that as we move forward, you're going to see fewer and fewer manufacturers providing the Microsoft drivers to run Windows XP. So at some point, driver compatibility is just going to be an issue, and then you're left with outsourcing or trying to create your own driver, and then it just becomes more and more expensive. So I say all of this to say, whatever your choice is, if you're on XP now, it really is time to consider moving to a more modern operating system. At least something more closer to this decade would be nice. All right. So here's a more interesting question. Why switch from Windows 7? Now, I'm never going to be wanting to tell a person, if they really like the operating system they're on, you don't need to change it, unless, of course, it's over a decade old and it's starting to fall apart. But that's a different story. If you have 7, you like 7, I'm not pushing you and telling you have to change. You don't. If you like it, stick with it. But it is important for you to note that there are a couple of things that actually make Windows 8 better than Windows 7. In fact, we do in a lot of ways refer to Windows 8 internally as a better 7 than 7. Like, for instance, faster boot times. Now, particularly if you're on an environment with a computer that supports UEFI that I mentioned, I mean, my gosh, your boot time can be reduced to a couple of seconds. In fact, the machine that I'm presenting to you on now will boot completely in less than 4 seconds. Longer battery life, you can look at somewhere in the neighborhood of 13 to 15% longer battery life, just over 7. And not to mention Windows XP, because the truth of it is Windows XP is stone stupid when it comes to understanding whether or not you're on power or on battery. It will give you a nice little battery monitor, but it behaves no differently if it's on battery power versus on plug. And consequently, you don't get great battery life. In fact, even by going to Windows 7 or Windows 8, you can, in some cases, increase battery life 35 to 40%. So it's quite a dramatic savings by doing that. Windows 8 does offer better performance because it is more lightweight. It actually uses almost 25% less memory than even Windows 7 did. So you've got a lot of flexibility there. It is more secure because we've updated it for the different types of security attacks that we've seen. We actually have done a lot around multi-monitor. And multi-monitor on Windows 8 is actually pretty nifty, to be honest with you, because what you can do, let's say for instance, if you have 2 monitors, is you can have one screen that operates as the start screen with all the live tiles, etc., and then the second screen acts as a desktop. So along with that, we've done other things like we've beefed up the File Explorer and we've improved Task Manager. We've just done a lot of stuff all the way around. So let's talk about that for a second. When you look at running Windows 8, here's the kind of the recommended requirements, okay? If you're going to do an upgrade, you can actually upgrade from XP, Vista, or 7. The processor requirement, though, at a minimum is 1 gigahertz, 2 gig of RAM, and 20 gig of hard disk space, okay? It's not a lot. It's been fairly consistent. In fact, as I said, it is actually less hardware requirements than Windows 7. Windows 7 had less hardware requirements than Vista, and 8 has less than 7. So we're going in a good direction if you ask me. Now along with that, let's say for instance you currently do have Windows XP, Vista, or 7. If you want to upgrade, you can absolutely upgrade to Windows 8. If you're going from Windows XP, there's not much that's going to transfer. Essentially what's going to happen when you install Windows 8 is it's going to push everything to a windows.old directory, and then you can kind of sift through and find your files or what have you. With Windows Vista, same kind of thing, but your files and your Windows 7 settings will stay in the same place. You can also set it to keep your files, or you can keep nothing at all. With Windows 7, however, when you do an upgrade, your apps and settings and files will carry over, but if you want to do a clean install, you can still do that. All right, now I've talked through this entire thing about Windows 8 Pro. As it is, that said, it is important to mention that we do have Windows 8, and again, that's kind of the equivalent of the home version, but we also have a product called Windows RT. And Windows RT is important to mention because it does function differently than the others. And I'm calling this out so you know what to look for and you don't accidentally purchase the wrong device. Windows RT is meant to be a long-lasting 18, 20-hour battery life, 3 days between charging, instant on, thin, lightweight experience, okay? And in fact, if you've seen the commercials for the Microsoft devices, the Surface and the Surface Pro has an Intel i5 processor in it. Surface itself runs an ARM-based device. Now, you're asking, okay, well, what does that necessarily mean? If you see Windows RT, that means it is running on an ARM-based processor, which is the same processor that is in all of our cell phones. It's the same type of processor that's in all of the other tablets that are existing today, be it iPad or Android devices. It is also it's also a processor that is completely incompatible with whatever system you have today running Windows. Your files will work, but all of your applications do not. Windows RT, because it's compiled for an ARM processor, does not run your current applications. So again, it's meant to be a lightweight, instant-on type of device. We have, basic, for consumption of media, for web surfing, etc., that type of thing. That's what it's meant for. Where the Windows RT differentiates itself from, say, an iPad or an Android tablet is that Windows RT actually includes a version of Office. So you get Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and OneNote in any Windows RT device. Now those 4 applications are about 98% identical to their big Windows counterparts. There are a couple of little things that you can't do, like running complex macros and things like that, but by and large, they work the same. The files are completely compatible, so anything created in either way, in either version, will work on the other version. So you have complete compatibility there. Again, I want to point this out. It's important to know what you're getting into. So if you're out there looking for a device and you see a small, lightweight device and it says RT, it's important to note that that device will run Office and will run any applications you purchase in the Windows Store, but will not run the applications that you're currently running on your PCs today. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. And with that, that's pretty much all the presentation that I have for you with regard to the technology and the differences. If now, Claude, if we want to open this up to any questions that anybody may have, we can certainly do that.
All right. Thank you, Brett. We'll now be moving to our live question and answer portion of today's presentation. If you have any questions, please send them in using the question and answer pane. I think we have one right now. It's from Don Kiel. He asks, when using multiple monitors, can you run a different app on each monitor? Example, Outlook on one and Excel on the second.
Oh, absolutely. When you're running multiple monitors in that type of scenario, as I said, there's 2 types of applications. We have these modern apps, which you see on the start screen, and then you have other apps like Excel, Word, PowerPoint, etc. You absolutely can have the different types of applications. I mean, you can have Excel running on one, Word running on the other, or let's say the weather app on one and PowerPoint on the other. You have complete flexibility with how you define what goes on which monitor. So yes, absolutely, you can do that.
All right, thank you. Let's see. Okay.
Come on, folks, ask some tough ones.
Yeah. I'm sure Brett can answer that. From Dan Goldberg, is there a recommended way to use the Windows Store in a business? Does each user need a login to access the Windows Store?
Okay, so that's actually a great question. When you set up a Windows 8 system, you have a couple of options. Now, if you're going to set it up in a domain environment, then you are essentially going to use what's called a local account, and then, so you'll have, for instance, TED, and then when you're setting it up, and then when you join it to the domain, it'll be, TED as a user of, XYZ company. You also have an alternative to use what's called a Microsoft ID. Now, Microsoft ID is a new way of basically giving a user an identifier. And all that Microsoft ID is a functioning email. So whether it's a hotmail.com or an outlook.com or Gmail or Yahoo or what have you, we don't care. It just needs to be a functional email account. Now, if you sign in with that email account, if you make that your username on the particular machine, that does a couple of things. That is your recognition at the store. That is your kind of your settings, what's tied to your settings. Case in point, if I get a new machine and I set it up, I use my same quote-unquote Microsoft ID, and what will happen then is it will pull my settings from the cloud. It will give me the same background, give me the same settings. It will set up my email account for me, etc. So it's a way of kind of identifying yourself as you add a device that will personalize and give you the same experience across all of them. The other piece of that, to finally get to the answer of your question, is that Microsoft ID does tie you to the store. Now, when you purchase or you download a free app from the store, that enables you as an individual to use that on up to 5 devices. Now, if you are in a domain environment where you're a local user, like you're Ted at XYZ company, you can still assign a Microsoft ID to that, and essentially you can tie that to a PayPal account or a credit card or what have you, and you can still purchase those devices. So in a domain environment, you would still use that quote-unquote Microsoft ID. It would just be separated from the user account a little bit on the system itself. So hopefully that answers that.
All right, thank you. Next question from Dawn again. Can you display multiple apps on a single screen?
So you can absolutely display multiple apps on a single screen. Now this works differently depending upon whether you're talking about the modern apps or you're talking about a desktop app. And here's where it's a little bit confusing. So Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. are what we would call desktop apps, meaning that you would pop those up in Windows and you would side by side them or whatever. The modern applications work a little bit differently because those modern apps were very much designed for a tablet in mind. So what you can do is, and it's part of the design spec of these modern applications, is that you can actually, if you pull from the top using your finger or a mouse, drag the app about halfway down to the center of the screen and then slide over to the right or to the left. And what that will do is it will conform that app to about 25% of the screen. It'll create a band on the left or the right-hand side, which will, and then that application will reconfigure to provide information in that space. Let's say, for instance, you're looking at the Bing Daily, which is a news aggregator. If you put it into that 25% column, the news stories will sort of tile vertically, and then you can pick on each one and get more information, etc., which will allow you to put a second app in the other 75% of that screen. So that's kind of the way it works. Now currently the way the design is, because we didn't want to make it too confusing, it's basically 2 apps that work that way. And there's actually a slider in the middle, so you can actually slide back and forth to define which one has the majority of the screen and which one has the lesser amount. But again, that's on the modern applications. The desktop apps will still function the same way they always have.
All right. Thank you. Next question from Jean Martin. Can you boot to a Windows desktop rather than the other screen?
Okay, so this is a question I hear fairly often. There's the difference in Windows 8 over Windows 7 is it doesn't have the start button on the desktop. So because the reason it does is because we've created this start screen which functions as the kind of the start button. Now we don't currently have a way built into the operating system that allows you to boot to the desktop because by bypassing that start screen, the only access you have is basically the applications that you pin to that start bar at the bottom, or the taskbar I should call it rather. So currently, no. That's not to say we'll never add that, but right now that's not doable in the operating system as it is.
Okay. Also from Jean Martin, will there be better compatibility with older programs like educational software later on?
Okay, this is also a really good question. Software compatibility is something that's very, very difficult for a variety of standpoints, particularly when you talk about niche programs. You know, I do see this in some educational programs. I do see this in some oil and gas and some, you know, applications for, you know, managing restaurants or country clubs, etc. One of the things that people had a lot of heartburn over when we launched Windows Vista is application compatibility. And the reason they had heartburn is because we really tightened up the security. Now people had issue with Vista because of app compatibility and performance and a few other things, but really nobody had anything negative to say about security. It really was a dramatic improvement in security over and above Windows XP. The problem with that is a lot of software that was written in the XP time period wasn't necessarily written in a way that took into consideration security. So a fair number of applications broke in Windows Vista because they were coded in a certain way that sort of bypassed protocols that we felt were important to maintain the integrity of the operating system. And that being the case, applications broke in Vista. Well, if you look at Windows 7, those same applications don't really work in Windows 7 either, and consequently those same applications don't work in Windows 8. And the sad thing is a lot of applications that were developed that people are using in those niche markets were applications that were written, you know, 10, 12 years ago and have never been updated for the more modern operating systems. They kind of decided, well, we've built this, we're going to leave it as is. So consequently, with those applications never being updated, you know, we're kind of stuck as far as compatibility goes. And I wish I could say that there would be, you know, a magic bullet in Windows 8 or future operating systems to make them work with these applications. But the fact of the matter is, the reason they broke is actually for very good reasons, either for security or for stability. And I really don't see us finding a workaround for that without compromising those things. So unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for that because I don't think Microsoft on the whole is willing to compromise on security and stability for the sake of compatibility. That was kind of our mantra up through XP, and we really paid sorely for that in terms of security and stability. And once we kind of set to this newer model, we basically said, no, we're not going backwards. So unfortunately, compatibility is going to be something that's a sticking point with those older applications.
Okay, thank you. From Mark, any issues connecting externally and accessing files and folders via the network to storage? Also, do you require remote user client access licenses or CALs?
Okay. So let me see if I've got all this right. With Windows 8 Pro, you can remote desktop into a Windows 8 Pro operating system. You can connect to it. That's absolutely still in that product. From Windows 8 Pro, you can absolutely manage an additional. So let's say, for instance, you have a server. You can remote desktop into that server and manage from a Windows 8 machine. You can also manage external files or whatever. For remote administration, you have never needed client access licenses to do that, and you've never needed any kind of client access license to access another client. So the answer to that is no. You don't need any kind of licensing of the sort, and it will function in a way similar to what you've expected from Windows 7.
Okay, I hope, Mark, that answers your questions. Now let's move on to the next from Bill. Do you have any information on the Windows Blue update? How will it change the OS as it stands?
Okay, so the reference to Blue. Blue is kind of an internal code name for some things that are coming next. Unfortunately, I appreciate the question. I just really can't comment on it. We have channels of disclosure, and those kind of take time. What I can tell you is it's not a, you know, we're not talking about anything here that's like a Windows 7 to Windows 8 change. So I'll leave it at that.
All right. From Theresa. Hi, is there a way to customize Windows 8 to have the look and feel of Windows 7 without downgrading?
Okay. So customizing Windows 8 to get the look and feel of 7, no, there's really not. And again, our intent was to create a platform where you had the same functionality on a touch device versus a keyboard and mouse device. And I realize if you don't have a touch screen, it may seem a little difficult at first. But I will be honest with you, I've delivered probably about, oh gosh, 200 or 300 Windows 8 presentations thus far, and maybe 15 of them were on a touch device. I actually prefer Windows 8 with a mouse and keyboard. So the experience can translate once you understand basically how it's different with a mouse and keyboard. And I will admit that can be, at least initially, a daunting process. Having said that, though, there are third-party applications out there that will help you do that very effectively. And so if that's something that you need, those are out there that are capable of taking care of those needs and giving you somewhat of a customization.
All right, thank you. The last one from Dan. I, being an IT admin, how would I set up the PCs to all have the same default apps from the Windows Store, since the Microsoft ID is only limited to 5 PCs?
Yeah, we understand that that's a difficulty right now. We're trying to figure out. So short answer, I don't have a good answer for you at this time. I know that we're talking about how we do that. There are a couple of things to note, though. Number one, that you're right. You're limited to 5 devices for each individual user on a Microsoft ID. That said, if you own a corporate license for a particular Windows app, and again, we're just talking about apps purchased in the Windows Store, okay? So if you're not purchasing them in the Windows Store, then you just pre-install them. And that's the other thing that's important, that if you have come up with or developed your own modern applications, as a company, you can absolutely sideload those in. You can bypass the store. You don't have to use it to basically install applications in that respect. So, but as far as corporate purchasing for apps from the Windows Store, like I said, we're still working that out. But do look for something on that in the near future.
All right, thank you for that. I believe that's our last question. Unless you guys still have questions to ask, please go ahead and send them in right now, because Britt is more than capable of answering all those for you. No questions? Oh, all right. Here is one. Do Windows 8 Pro tablets need to be connected physically, or connected physically in order to join a domain, or can that be done wirelessly?
Okay. Joining the domain does not really require it does not require a hardware connection. You can absolutely do it wirelessly. In fact, I remote office, so I work out of my house, and whenever I need to rebuild a machine, I actually join the domain of my machine, or join my machine to the domain using a virtual private networking connection. So I do it over wide area network versus local Wi-Fi. So absolutely, all of those methods are capable with Windows 8. In fact, all of them were capable with Windows 7 and Windows Vista as well.
Okay, thank you. No other questions, guys? I guess. Oh, here's one more. Oh, no, he's just thanking you.
Okay, great. So I guess we can give back a few minutes of time then.
Yeah, thank you. Should there be, all right, no more questions, unless you want to add some more, Brett?
Just basically, I want to thank all of you for attending. Hopefully you got some insight into Windows 8. And if you were, maybe considering it, I highly encourage you to go check it out, kick the tires. And I think you'll find that overall it's a pretty good, pretty performant operating system.
Thank you. That's about all the time that we have. Should you have additional questions, you can send them in offline and they'll be addressed and answered through our on-demand email. Now, I would like to thank you, Brett, and all of you for this wonderful and very informative webinar. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.